got some turbulence up ahead. Reach out to the pilot's planner. Time for another edition of the Wealthy Pilots podcast. And Scott, we're going to talk about some turmoil in the airlines. I guess it's better to say in turmoil in the air. It's not the air.
True.
But more the airlines. Look, it's been record travel, it seems like. A lot of people traveling, but yet the airlines are kind of struggling. And obviously with this being the Wealthy Pilots podcast, kind of an important topic to talk about.
Yeah, it depends what airline you're talking about for sure. But, for the ones that are struggling, if you're losing money per passenger, having more passengers isn't solving your problems. It's making them worse.
That's a good point. Yeah. And you've got what, I think it's JetBlue and maybe Spirit, I think, that haven't turned a profit since the pandemic. They're losing money. So that's not good, right? It seems to be some of the lower airlines, but there's some problems going on. I shouldn't say lower. I should say the smaller ones, I guess, right?
I think, you run into different efficiency issues based off of what's going on. I mean, I'm not an airline industry expert in terms of how to run the airlines, but, doing some management consulting in a previous life, if you're losing money per widget, it's not good when you have more widgets coming out. I mean, it's good if the top line revenue is there. Obviously, that's good. It gives you a fighting chance. But what you're seeing is just like the impacts from inflation on all the operating costs is really what's killing them. If you look into it a little bit, it's tough because you have some of the higher performing airlines and with Delta, American, United coming out with just really good contracts for their pilots, for some of their crew. The cash flow the company's making, the bonuses that some of the executives are getting, the profit margins are higher than they've ever been. So that's all good stuff. But it also sets a standard out there in the industry that some of the smaller regional airlines are, hey, we should be getting some of that too, because we're still delivering this service for the passengers, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And I think that is true. It's fair and it's logical. And, like Allegiant, right? Allegiant was one of the airlines where a lot of their pilots had voted to threaten to strike.
So there's some strike conversation out there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting because you have that on one end. You have Southwest Airlines with their stock price down 46% and them talking about layoffs, Frontier talking about layoffs, Spirit going through a Chapter 11 bankruptcy right now.
Yeah.
And despite a lot of the good things, still United, their flight attendants are threatening to strike right now in an effort to get a better contract through their union. And so it's very dynamic right now in the industry. And so, to me, the different... based off of what airline you're with, you're having a different experience right now out in the industry. And so I think for, some of the larger carriers, Delta, American, United, the profit margins are pretty good. Operations are going pretty good. You actually see them adding legs for the first time in a while too. And so I think those are all good signs. And then on the flip side, you have, like you mentioned, JetBlue and Spirit not turning a profit for a long time. Spirit going through this Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which, doesn't mean that the company is going under or that they're liquidating assets or anything like that. It just means that they're going through a restructuring of their debt and, putting payments on hold and just kind of giving them an opportunity to reorganize so they can try to get profitable again. But it's very dynamic out there right now. And so to me, I feel like the key takeaway is, for some of the folks that are going through some of those more challenging times, this is like, it's an interesting moment where economically things are pretty good. I know the news would have us believe otherwise. There's pockets of recession out there, but overall the economy is doing well. The market is doing well. The pay is about as high as it's ever been, but there's still this opportunity where people are getting furloughed or offered lower pay and those kind of things. So, how do you weather this little storm that you're in despite the sunny skies around you? And so kind of having a plan for that. And then for the guys that are in really good times right now, it's really making sure, hey, good times don't always last. We know that.
Exactly. Yeah.
We know that it's not going to, hey, I'm the eternal optimist. Do I want to believe that the market's going to go nothing but up forever? Of course I do. It's just not reality.
Right.
It's just not reality. And if you go find a gray-haired captain and ask him what it's been like the last 30 years of his or her career, they're going to talk to you about the recession, the pandemic when nobody was flying, and people who were brand new were getting furloughed, and guys were going back to the military, and thankful that they had been in the reserves so they could pick that time back up and feed their families. And that was just 5 short years ago.
Right.
Really, 4.5 years ago, we were fighting those fights. And you look back at some of the bankruptcies and the restructurings and how many airlines have bought each other. It's a dynamic, competitive industry. So when things are really good, that's great. But to me, I do think it's good to be optimistic about your future with the airline and about your future in the industry. It's a great industry for a ton of people.
Yeah.
But how do you have a plan for when things go wrong? You have some sort
having a strategy. Yeah. You got to. On our previous episode that we did, we were talking about some things. If you got side hustles, we've done some things on that, and so you got to have a plan, right? So if you're thinking that, you also need to have a financial strategy and plan, and we'll see what happens when the new year comes, when Trump gets into office. We'll see what happens with energy dependency. If we get back into being a little bit more dependent, that could bring prices down. That could kind of take care of some of these airlines problems as well. Because I'm sure that's probably the biggest piece of the problem right now is just fuel costs.
Yeah. It's fuel cost and it's labor. Those are the two biggest things, and the labor, you're not getting around of it. A lot of that's dictated. You need 2 pilots. You need a crew at a certain size. It just is what it is. You're not going to say, at the corporate headquarters level, they might do some cutbacks and try to restructure. But in terms of actually operating the airline, a lot of that is really just dictated by either the FAA or dictated by the operational structure to just move the people and the luggage around.
Yeah.
So there's just a certain level of that it's just the reality of inflated wages and inflated energy costs. So, hopefully we'll see some of that come down not on the wage side, but hopefully we'll see some of that come down on the energy side based off of what happens here in the new administration. But, at the same token, there's a lot of things going on out there right now. Like one of my good friends is, he's like an expert at, being a real high seniority guy on a medium-sized aircraft or maybe even one of the smaller Boeing ones that they use for training in his routes that Delta uses for training all the time.
Right.
And so he's like the expert at knowing what flights to pick where he's most likely to get bumped off and then still get paid and then pick up a green slip to get double overtime. And he's getting triple pay. He's just got this thing down to a science.
Wow.
And, but a lot of that is the benefactor of all this record hiring that the airline has done. So even he knows, he's like, oh, it's really good right now, but it's not going to last. And so, he's a super smart, frugal guy. And so he's already thinking he's just banking cash, but he's not out there saying, hey, this is my new base salary and let me go buy a house and a boat and a car based off of what this income is like today. And so I think there's that part of it that yes, there might be some opportunities right now that guys are leveraging to make more money than they ever thought they ever could flying airplanes.
Right.
But it's not necessarily prudent to go out there and build your lifestyle around that, because we're seeing in these other airlines, it can turn quick. It can turn quick based off of things that are really outside of your control. So it's good to save up for that rainy day. Yeah,
I was going to say, and that's basically the nature of planning your financials and retirement and all that stuff. Most of these things can be out of our control. Taxation, inflation, all this stuff can be out of our control. So that's where a strategy comes into play, right? That's where a checklist, that's where you do all these things if you're being a pilot. So do all these things with your wealth as well, right? So get on the calendar, come on in, have a conversation, sit down and talk with Scott about, what you're worried about or what's on the horizon, things of that nature. And you can find all the information in the show links below. And that way you can just reach out to him, schedule some time for yourself. You can visit him at retireairlines.com. But anything else to think about, Scott, before we wrap this up?
Yeah. And whether it's on the good side or the bad side, I think a lot of times just having a conversation around what you got going on can really just help you navigate those next steps, right? If you're, having to navigate a furlough or something like that, and thinking through, hey, how do we get by the next 6-12 months while the airline's recovering and things come back? Or you're on the top side where, the 401k contributions are higher than they've ever been and the pay is higher than it's ever been. How do you make sure that you manage that really well? So you are setting yourself up for not only the retirement that you never dreamed possible, but also when eventually those rainy days come, you take it in stride and it's no big deal.
There you go. All right. Well, this has been the Wealthy Pilots Podcast. Again, if you need some help, make sure you're reaching out to qualified professionals like Scott. Find all the information in the show note links below. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple or Spotify or YouTube, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time on the Wealthy Pilots Podcast.
Is your 401k working as hard as you are? Let's find out at thepilotsplanner.com to get started with your free full thrust 401k toolkit. Come see what a good financial co-pilot can do to help make sure your retirement is ready to take flight. Visit us at thepilotsplanner.com. That's thepilotsplanner.com.
Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.